Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We now have a quorum present, and I'm going to call to order the meeting of the full committee of Ways and Means. Would like to welcome everybody this morning. Ask everybody if they have cell phones, like I'm guilty of many times, to disengage their noise-making ability. And I think today, as soon as I can find our agenda, we have some first readers and then some second readers for consideration. But before I do that, we have some special guests with us today in attendance, and the chair would like to recognize Representative Glanton to introduce us to some of the special guests that have traveled a long way to be with us today. Representative Glanton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the members of the committee. I have some distinguished guests here with us this morning, and would just certainly like to take an opportunity to recognize them. I have Pastor Arthur Powell here from Clayton County.
Welcome.
Pastor Harry Riley, and the mayor of the great city of Riverdale, Evelyn Wynn Dixon. And, of course, you know Senator Emmanuel Jones and others. So we certainly want to welcome you all here to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, and thank you for being with us. Okay. Before we start our calendar, is there any member that would like to be heard by the committee for any reason before we get underway here? And as soon as we still have 7, Representative Flood, I actually want us to conduct a subcommittee meeting on, I don't know if they've been able to contact you yet, off to the side on your multiple sclerosis legislation, yours and Representative Collins. So the tax subcommittee can deliberate without us if they don't mind while we're doing first readers. Representative Knight, if you would be kind enough to chair that, or one of the other chairs. Representative Peake will be fine. I think you heard him this morning. If you'll just start with Representative Flood's, and we'll just do first readers. There won't be anything to vote on. So if you. Okay. Is Representative Meadows with us this morning? Did I see him? Okay. I don't see him. Representative Chairman Mills, are you with us? He's in rules, and we do have a lot of members in rules that we're waiting on arriving. Representative Abdul Salam, I know you're with you. Good morning. If you would come forward to the microphone. We have in this committee a process we call the first reader process, Representative, and others that maybe have not been here before. The purpose of which is to assign new legislation that comes before us to our subcommittees, but also to make sure that the entire committee is aware of what is in our subcommittee process, so they can decide on their schedules on what they can attend and what they're especially interested in and what they can add the most to the deliberations on. And we're asking you this morning, Representative Abdul Salam, to do a first reader, which is a brief, typically less than 3-minute explanation generally of what the intent of your legislation is, what you think that it does. And then we will not take a vote on it this morning, but sometimes there are a few questions, most times not, and then we will assign that to a subcommittee where the bill will be vetted in a very comprehensive way. So the chair recognizes a great fellow comrade in arms, Representative Abdul Salam, to tell us about your House Bill 1393, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to physically read the bill itself or just talk about it?
We'd like to hear your summary and what your intent is.
Well, you know, being my fellow hometown fellow, I want to make sure I do what you want me to do, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, House Bill 1393 is an amendment that will allow members of the MARTA Act, which are currently 5 counties, to be able to raise their cap on sales tax in order to levy an additional 1 cent for the purpose of, and solely for the purpose of, public transportation. I don't have to tell anybody in this room that has a television about the pending catastrophe in Clayton County. In just a few short days, our current transit system, C-Tran, will shut down. 2.5 million riders per year will be stranded. 65% of those riders are going to and from work every day. And I will tell you that there are no other means of transportation for 61% of those people. No car, no ability to buy a car, no family with car. Most of these people are working in the low wage jobs. They're housekeepers. They're technicians at the hospital. Our hospital will greatly suffer. All of our business, our chairman of the Chamber of Commerce came to the hearing that Senator Jones had a few weeks ago and said that Clayton County business will dry up if we do not continue this transit. So what I'm asking very simply this morning is to add a section to the current legislation that simply says, in a county in which the tax levied for purposes of a metropolitan area system of public transportation is first levied after January 1st, 2010. And I will point out that this only applies to the counties that were in the original constitutional act that established MARTA, and Clayton County is one of those counties. I gave you a handout of some other information and what I thought about it, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them for you.
Does any member of the committee have any questions? I see Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not necessarily a question, but certainly wanted to make a comment as to echo Representative Abdul Salam and to commend her for her leadership in this effort. As she said, that our county is one that has been going through quite a bit with this transportation and transit issue, and so we're just trying to find different tools in the toolbox to help us to provide that very needed transportation to those citizens and that require that type of transportation. So I just really wanted to echo her remarks, Mr. Chairman, and support her in this effort. I
will also like to point out, thank you, Representative Glanton, for adding to that, but also 33,000 of these riders are elderly and disabled. That's a separate number than the 2.5 million. 33,000 depend on this transit system to go to their doctor's appointments. Some have to go to dialysis 3 times a week. They would have no other means of transportation. And I'll tell you, somebody said, well, why don't they take a cab? In Clayton County, as my mayor can attest to, Mayor Dixon can attest, we don't have taxi cab companies. You'd have to get a cab from College Park or from East Point. It's going to be catastrophic if we can't get the help and allow the county commission, Mr. Chairman. The county commission will simply be able to raise this tax if they so choose. It enables them, and the voters would then vote on referendum to do so.
Yes, we have some more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Number 26.
Me. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask the Chair, is this first reader or is this bill up for consideration?
First reader.
Okay, I'll reserve questions.
Okay.
I had some friendly questions.
See me after?
I just want, I'll hold them for later on.
I'll talk to you on the floor.
Number 15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really, it's just a comment. I think this is vitally important to the people in Clayton County, and I think we should move with all due haste to get this bill assigned to subcommittee so that it can be heard properly. I understand the bill's been narrowly drawn so that it really only impacts Clayton County.
Thank you, Representative Flood. Representative Taylor.
Thank you for bringing this bill. So would they then be under MARTA or C-Tran, or how would that?
Well, currently MARTA has the contract that operates C-Tran.
Right.
What we would seek to do, and it's actually published in the newspaper today, there's a local piece of legislation that is also coming that will allow the citizens to vote whether or not they want to become a part of MARTA. If they choose not to, it still allows the county commission to operate some other transit program. But the citizens will ultimately get to decide whether we want to become a part of MARTA. And I will tell you, Representative Taylor, we've had 3 public hearings on this issue, and the sentiment is very clear.
Okay. Representative Abrams.
Thank you. Can you speak to, or do you have someone who can speak to the impact this may have on Clayton County's educational system? My concern would be that, given the fact that you've just come out of de-accreditation processes, by ending transportation, you run the risk of once again jeopardizing the accreditation of the educational system.
We will jeopardize every system in the county. Let me be very clear. Dr. Heatley understands and has spoken that several of our students use transit to go to and from high school classes, from one area to another in the county. We also had Dr. Tim Hines, the president of Clayton State University, who absolutely believes that it will devastate thousands of his students because they have no other means to arrive at the university. Not only Clayton County students, but students from all over the metro area. We have students coming from as far away as Alpharetta and downtown Atlanta coming to Clayton State, and they're using C-Tran to get there. There's no other way to get there. We've heard from our technical colleges. We've heard from all of our school systems. It will absolutely hurt students and education at every level.
The other question I have, if I may, and I think this is a question all of us have, but I'd like to give you a chance to publicly address it. Why is this bill coming before us at this time in the session instead of earlier?
Well, we've been working on several other measures with the county commission, and ultimately it is up to the county to decide how they want to do this. What they clearly asked us to do by resolution was to find a means for funding public transit. This is the way that we can address that.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Chairman Sims?
I think she asked the question. I was just wondering why so late, and you answered the question.
Well, Chairman Sims, let me just expound a little bit. You know, there was a chance that we were going to get some FTA help. There was a chance that we were going to roll into something else. The last-ditch effort, which was in the paper last week, was that they tried to allow Greta to assume the service, and the FTA denied Greta. So it forced us to have to try to do something else, and this is what we propose.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Representative Glanton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm kind of want to piggyback on her response to Representative Abrams a few minutes ago. Originally, this effort was thought to be an isolated population of the citizens of Clayton County, but as recently as last week, it is now my understanding that the superintendent of schools has presented to the Board of Education to eliminate transportation for specialty programs, AP programs, after-school programs, and summer programs. So this is now has a county-wide impact. Not saying it didn't have it originally, but certainly it is expounded on it now. And so I just want the committee to totally understand the urgency of the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Glanton. Thank you, Representative Abdul Salam. We appreciate that very comprehensive presentation. I mean that sincerely, not flippantly. And I know this is an urgent matter that will impact a lot of our fellow Georgians.
And Mr. Chair, if I may say, I would like to make sure that we hopefully have the opportunity for our guests that joined us today through my mistake will be able to be heard at the next opportunity.
It is a policy of this committee to assign legislation to a subcommittee of the committee for that very reason.
I appreciate that. So
that we have I wouldn't say an informal, but a relaxed atmosphere where we completely vet all legislation and try to, at least before we even get into any policy disagreements, if there are any, we want to know for sure what it says and does and make sure it's correct as written. And your guest will be welcome at all of those deliberations.
Thank you, Mr.
More than welcome, because the more input we can get, the better we feel, because that means we've done a better job of understanding what we're asking to, we're being asked to vote on later on. So we will assign that to our sales tax subcommittee. We have 3 chairmen of each of our subcommittee, the purpose of which is hopefully one of them can find a scheduling time, especially during these crazy days before crossover that we always seem to have to go through every year. Sales Tax Subcommittee is Chairman Martin Scott, Chairman Don Parsons, Chairman David Knight. Either of those three gentlemen can arrange a hearing for you, and you can contact the Ways and Means office in 133, and they'll help coordinate with those subcommittee chairs when they can get the first hearing arranged for you during these very busy days. We thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Glad to have you with us. Thank you. Is Chairman Smyrie with us today for a first reader? He's probably still in rules, so I'm gonna. He's got House Bill 1372. Members of the committee, I'm gonna assign that to the Sales Tax Subcommittee. Did Chairman Meadows ever come in? No. He's got House Bill 1408. That will also be assigned to the Sales Tax Subcommittee. Did Chairman Mills come in? Still in rules. And ladies and gentlemen, there are many conflicting committee meetings going on as we speak here, so don't take the fact that I'm asking if these people are here as irresponsible behavior on their behalf. It's not. They have to economize their time like everybody else here this time of year. House Bill 1409 by Chairman Mills will be assigned to our Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee. Now, we'll move on to our second readers for today. I see Chairman England is here with us. Mr. Chairman, if you recognize, please, to tell us about your House Bill 347, please, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I hope everyone is well this morning. I saw that y'all were getting busy in Ways and Means. Thought I'd do my shopping early and get a bill out today, maybe. I bring to you this morning House Bill 347 has been vetted through the Sales Tax Subcommittee, and just very briefly, what the bill does, it removes a little quirk we had in Georgia Code that caused sales tax to be charged on the ad valorem tax portion of leased equipment. Not much more complicated than that. You have a up-to-date, hot off the press fiscal note in front of you also that Lindsay's handed out this morning, and you can see the impact that it would have. Looking at those numbers, the one thing to remember that a lot of that money right there is money that would stay in the hands and pockets of small business people across the state, and that would help them, whether it's stay in business or employ more folks, whatever the need be or whatever their need might be. It just kind of relieves a little double taxation burden from them, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Gosh, I've never seen the committee this quiet. Is everybody okay? Oh, good. We have a question. Chairman Knight. Oh, you're on.
Hello.
I will if you'll stop that.
Not so much as I will stop that. Not so much as a question, but a comment. I appreciate Chairman England bringing this. This has been an issue that we've looked at in the past through some of our tax studies, and what this is a tax on a tax. And I want to make sure the members are very clear about that. We're computing the sales tax amount with the value of that ad valorem tax in there. So it is a tax on a tax. And I appreciate the chairman bringing the bill, something that needed to be done from a policy. I don't think the state wants to be in the business of taxing taxes. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, okay. Chairman Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman England, sorry. Just want to make sure this, so what is happening here is if I was renting a piece of equipment for my business at $1,000 a month, and ad valorem is added by the rental company as the whatever the property tax may be for an entire year. I guess so it's added to that monthly bill, and then the sales tax is calculated on that total amount, now.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And, some will do it monthly, some do it yearly. The instances I've been involved with where I noticed this, the leasing company that I dealt with billed once a year, and it was just a line item. I had the equipment plus the sales tax on the equipment. Then I had the ad valorem tax, and then the sales tax on the ad valorem tax.
Okay.
And that's what caught my attention is
Where you actually saw the sales tax
Exactly.
added to the specific ad valorem tax.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I called and argued with the lady and had to call her back and apologize when I found out that they were actually doing it right and we had a problem.
And what this does is eliminate that sales tax
Yes,
on
sir.
the ad valorem tax only. So,
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good bill. Thank you for bringing
Thank
it
you. Mm-hmm.
Would you present it? Number 60, Representative Graves.
Yeah, thank you. How do you suspect that those who collect it now will change? Because I see this and I know exactly what you're talking about. And if someone's been doing this for a long time the wrong way, or the way that we would anticipate they shouldn't have been doing it, but they were doing it by law, how do we know they change, and then what would be the recourse if they don't? And you go back to that lady and you call her back. And
Well, that's what it winds up being a lot of times. Of course, most leasing companies have staff attorneys that keep up with statutes that are passed within each state that they do business in. That would be the ultimate cure there, or the ultimate fix there. Secondly, then, of course, it would fall on the customer also to call and question that charge or ask that it be removed.
so is it a form they fill out, or is it just their invoices, the way their invoicing software may be set up?
Invoicing, it's just like me selling you something and invoicing you is the way it's done.
So if we pass this, the burden's probably primarily initially going to be on the consumer to try to...
It actually should be on the leasing company, but yes, it might be on the consumer.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But at this point, the consumer has no recourse.
That's right.
Well, Chairman England, after that scintillating presentation, I see no more questions, so obviously the gentleman was very thorough, and as usual. With that being said, what's the posture of the committee? We have a motion to pass. We have a second from Chairman Stevens. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Will be in rules this afternoon. Thank you, sir. We're delighted to have with us the Majority Leader of the House today, and I'm going to ask him if he would present House Bill 1405. Leader Keene.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, honored to be here along with the Pro Tem. The Speaker was coming. We were detained. In fact, we went down to your office thinking you were meeting there, and he was unable to get over here because he had another commitment. But he wanted me to come and share with this committee his interest in House Bill 1405. As you know, he is the second signer, along with the Pro Tem, myself, and the Chairman, of course, and then also Representative Bryant, Representative Carter. What this bill is doing something that's been talked about for decades but never acted on. It sort of grew out of a meeting with the state economist that we had a couple of weeks ago where, as we were trying to manage a budget in a most difficult fiscal year, that we look long-term toward reforming and modernizing the tax code in Georgia to match our economy, to match our citizens, and to match where we think our economy will go once this recession is over and we begin to move forward. House Bill 1405 really just does not change any taxes at all, other than establishing for the first time a special council on tax reform made up of economists, business leaders, and other appointments at the discretion of the presiding officer in both chambers, members that would be able to, free from the political pressures of this building, come up with recommendations that they could submit to the presiding officers next January. And then once those recommendations are made, there would be a special standing committee, and there's precedent for that in this chamber, as you know, with the special committee on tort reform, civil justice reform, the special committee on CON reform. We have a special committee this session on small business development, and so there is precedent for that. What makes it unique is it would be a joint House and Senate committee, which would be tasked with hearing these recommendations and then moving forward to the chambers those recommendations with any changes they would want to make. That's basically what this bill does. I think from a legislative standpoint, what it does for each member of both the House and the Senate is allow you to be honest with your constituents and say, we're going to let some people, or very similar to the Grace Commission or the BRAC Commission, to be as free from political pressures as possible, to come back and make recommendations to us that we believe are common sense and that will benefit all Georgians and benefit our economy. I don't know what those recommendations may be, Mr. Chairman, members. I have no idea. In fact, I want them to be free to think as far outside the box, but to give us critical analysis, give us recommendations. It may be the pleasure of this legislative body not to enact any of them, or some of them, or all of them. But I think we need to hear from them, task them with that, and that's what House Bill 1405 does. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will attempt to answer any questions that the members may have.
I'm sure there's going to be some, because I know there's going to be some proposed amendments. Does anybody have any questions for the presenter that's here? Representative Abrams.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Leader. Was there any thought given to, in the composition of the Special Tax Council, ensuring that there was intentional bipartisanship in the appointments made by the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker?
Yes, I believe there's language in the bill that says of the appointments made by the presiding officer, the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor, at least one would have to be from the minority party. As you know, this is an election year, so I'm not sure which party that will be. That'll be up to the voters. But when we reconvene in January, those members reelected, then whoever the Speaker, the Lieutenant Governor, et cetera, are, then they would have to, whatever the minority party would be, would have to be represented. Yes, ma'am.
If I can follow up, actually, the language, and I may have this confused, the language in the Special Counsel, which consists of the economist and has the enumerated persons, that actually doesn't include language to require that it be bipartisan. The bipartisanship is in the special committee, is the joint
How would
committee.
you determine bipartisanship from economist and business leaders?
And
I don't know what their political affiliations are.
And certainly I agree with you. I was only speaking to line 59 and 60, where the appointments are made by the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House. You have two appointments each. There is no mention of bipartisanship in those appointments. That is included in the special joint committee, but it's not included in the commission. And I think that would be my question.
Right. As I said, whatever appointments they make to the special counsel, the thought of establishing the council of representative is to try to be as non-political or partisan as possible. I could not tell you the political affiliation, with the possible exception of one individual named in the bill, or you know where their political affiliations are. Whatever the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House, or whoever they decide to appoint, hopefully will be void of any political affiliation, but only the fact that they could bring input to the debate. So I wouldn't speak for them, but I don't know how we would require them to say one has to be a member of this party or the other when none of the others are designated by political affiliation.
Thank you.
Number 15, is that Representative Flood?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Leader, thank you as well. I believe that this is something that's long overdue and certainly a measure that has a lot of validity. There are a couple of questions. You mentioned that you had no predetermined notions as to what types of bills or legislation might be proposed, but is there sort of what's going to be then the marching orders for this body? I mean, what are they supposed to do?
Well, they are examining. We've had discussion with the Council of Economic Advisors, as you know, already, and they have made input. In fact, a couple of those members who have been around a long time, longer than most of us here, have said they've had these discussions in informal before. But I think, Representative, our marching orders to them is to look at everything in the tax code, every area that we tax, every area that we exempt. I think we all know we've, over the years, voted for a lot of exemptions down here that are popular politically, but they may not be the best policy, and it's very hard for us as elected and political figures sometimes to address those in open debate without fear of some political opponent or perceived opponent slanting something against us. So we want them to be free to look at those things. If they feel like things we put into code now are not effective, that they are punitive in terms of their nature, I'd like to hear from them and tell us that, so that it will allow us, if we come back, to answer those questions and move forward. So I don't want to narrow their focus, but we do want to tell them to look at the income tax code, both on the personal and the corporate, the sales tax code, and make any recommendations they feel like would modernize the code, make it more efficient. I'm concerned, and I know you share this, that as we move out of this recession, and as you know, the state is lagging behind nationally in coming out, that we have a tax code that matches and maximizes the growth when we come out of the recession. And I certainly know that there are people far more qualified than I to make those recommendations, and that's what we're trying to do is build this panel. And look, anytime you appoint a committee, a council, commission, whatever you want to call it, they're always going to be, well, how about this guy? And then the next thing you know, it's 200 people. You've got to have a workable number that's representative, and that's the intent of the legislation.
Further inquiry, Mr. Chair.
Please.
And I believe the gentleman is forthright in your interest in trying to get as much of a bipartisan effort, and I think it would be helpful to have, because what I understand this commission is going to be asked to do is to come back to us and make a recommendation that we, as a body, will only get to vote up or down. We won't get to tweak it, fiddle with it. It will essentially be, once they introduce it to the General Assembly, it's right. Our task then to vote yes or no on the measures.
It wouldn't be purely, they would not write the bill. We constitutionally still have to have legislatively the ability to draft the bill. What we would want to do is say that we're going to take their recommendations as a whole. We'll be able to tweak those and modify those, but there's no value, in my opinion, and I believe the sponsors of this measure, there's no value in tasking individuals to give of their time, which is as a voluntary to be objective, to craft some ideas, and then it will be up to the members of this body to say if we accept those or reject them.
Well, I agree with
of which tax collections are occurring, and I'm one who believes we need to spread that base out, and I'm sure this committee will arrive at that conclusion. But, Mr. Chairman, do you see this as similar to the water plan that we adopted a few years ago? You know, there was a council appointed. It was a very difficult issue, a very complicated issue, and diverse opinions, and I think the conclusion that was arrived at through that process allowed the members to get there. And this somewhat reminds me of that, taking a difficult issue with diverse opinions and getting the General Assembly to that point.
I absolutely agree with you on your former comments about spreading the base. And I certainly agree with you that this is very similar at the state level of the water plan. It's been modeled after just how we did handle those very intricate water issues, and at the federal level, the BRAC Commission. As much as we could get there under state law and our Constitution, that's been the intent, at least, and all that to be nonpartisan,
right?
And to get a factual base to begin with from a nonpartisan tribunal, so that we can then get into the politics of it, after that's established, and not let the politics of it interrupt the academic quest of it, which is so far overdue,
right,
in my opinion, and apparently yours in this state as well, is looking at the comprehensive balance of the entirety of our tax code and our revenue needs attendant thereto or adjacent to that.
Well, I just want to thank you for. I think it takes leadership to put forth this, because basically what you're doing is you're recommending that a group outside of this body, in essence, you're entrusting them with a lot of this conversation and debate, and then returning that back to us. And I appreciate your willingness to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Not sure who's next. We'll take Representative Flood.
Wave.
I'm sorry, Wave. All right. Representative Taylor. Wave. And is this Representative Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I see in here where we've listed the people. I don't see anybody who specifically represents agriculture, which is 20% of the state's economy. We haven't listed anyone from the Georgia Agribusiness Council or Georgia Farm Bureau. One of my concerns would be if we are specifically listing NFIB in the Georgia Chamber, with agriculture being 20% of Georgia's economy, why wouldn't we have listed someone from the Georgia Agribusiness Council or Georgia Farm Bureau to guarantee that agriculture would have a voice in this?
Well, since agriculture is such a large percentage of the overall economy in Georgia, they certainly have a voice with the chambers. They certainly have a voice with the NFIB people. And they certainly could be one of the appointees from the four that are still yet to be named by the leadership people that have the ability to appoint. That particular segment of our economy has what was certainly discussed in the early incubation, so to speak, of this legislation, and I would agree with the gentleman that there probably should be a seat at the table in a sense for them, whether it be representative by some other member, a chamber member of this council or an NFIB, or directly seated. They certainly that industry will certainly be taken into account. But we're also being careful not to get single issue oriented. Period. And that's not to say that they shouldn't be represented, because they should. But we're trying to keep the advocacies out of the deliberations until we get the academic fact base. And then the advocacies, I'm sure, will be heard through the elected officials here most definitely. But I certainly take what you say as a very good suggestion, and I'm sure the appointors in this bill might very well agree to comply with that request.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I know that the majority leader had to leave for a minute, but I would like to indulge the committee by asking that we suspend action temporarily until he can come back. And I know we've got some other bills that are on the agenda, so that as we go through this very important piece of legislation, that he is here to go through the voting process and answer any more questions.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. We have a lot of work to do. Let's see. Is there any member, Chairman Wilkerson, with us? Chairman Chanel, is he in the hall? Yeah, please, Chairman Chanel. You're recognized to tell the committee about your House Bill 1105, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. House Bill 1105 simply extends the sunset on the inventory tax exemption for boat dealers. We've done this for 2 previous times. Since the last time it was enacted, there were about 400 boat dealers in the state at that time. Since that time, as you might imagine, the bottom has fell out of the boat business, if you will. There's approximately 100 less dealers now than there were. And revenue overall has declined about 50%. I know in my district, I represent 2 lakes, Lake Oconee and Lake Sinclair. We've had a number of boat dealers go out of business, and this simply extends that exemption from ad valorem tax on inventory 2 more years. My understanding is that the physical note, as relates to the state, would only apply to the 0.25 mils, which would be approximately $4,800 in terms of what the cost to the state would be of doing this. And Mr. Chairman, there is a typo in the bill. I respectfully request, and we didn't catch it at the subcommittee level, but on page 2, line 28, if this committee looks favorably on this bill, that needs to be changed to January 1, 2011 from 2009.
We have a sub before the committee where we did change that
I'm sorry.
in the subcommittee process. Any questions for the presenter? I don't see any. What's the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion do pass, signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members of the committee. Today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did Chairman Wilkerson come back in? I know everybody's running around. There. Are you going to do it? Okay. You want to present from your place, Chairman Stevens, House Bill 1069, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1069 is essentially a conduit for in the event that we were to get more stimulus money down the road. This is a conduit for that allows GFA to collect that stimulus money for the purposes of directing it for energy-saving equipment and water-efficient equipment that the federal government may send down, and that's all that it does. It doesn't create a tax credit. All that it does is if we get if the money does come from the feds, that we've got a conduit to disperse.
Okay. Any questions? It's subject to federal funding solely. Money in the bank, as I understand.
Absolutely.
What's the posture of the committee? A motion. Here a second. Here a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Hearing motion passes. There will be in rules. Thank you. Okay. Representative Black, tell us about your House Bill 971, please, sir. What number is that you're at? Will you push your button, Representative Black? Gotcha. You're recognized.
Well, this is a sweet little old bill that just saves state a little bit of money and makes us look like bright legislators with some vision. It rounds off the amount of money that the Revenue Department will deal with to $1. If it's less than that a person owes, they will not bill them. If there's a refund of less than $1, it will not be sent to them unless the taxpayer requests it.
Any questions for the author? I don't see any questions. What's the desire of the committee? I have a motion to pass. Do I hear second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion do pass signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you, Representative Black. That's I think that's going to save the state a whole lot of money over time. I really appreciate the gentleman bringing that legislation. Maybe we won't get any more 2-cent refund checks sent out in the mail. What about? Okay, we've just been joined by Representative Collins. Thank you for being here, sir. If you would present, you're recognized to present your House bill, which passed out of the second meeting of subcommittee here. You can thank Representative Flood for representing you in that meeting.
Thank you, Representative.
And would you tell us about your bill 1272, please, sir?
Thank you. Again, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Representative Flood, and to the committee. What this bill does, 1272, is allow any taxpayer that have a refund or any type of programs that could actually gather money to do type of programs to help the lupus and the kidney disease foundation to put money towards their when they do their income tax, that they can check off at the bottom that they would like to have money, parts of that money sent to the lupus foundation and to the kidney foundation. That's pretty much what all it does. It helps in the research and development of people that are with kidney disease and with lupus. Any questions?
I see any questions from members? Chairman Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Collins, just want to verify for the committee so they will know that there's no cost to the state to do this.
No cost at
It's
all.
all the cost to administer it is taken out from the Department of Revenue. Is that not true? And,
that is true.
And then therefore all the additional proceeds would go to a very worthy organization.
Yes, and it's a volunteer.
Okay,
volunteer. Thank you.
Representative 16. Graves, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Representative Collins, we had a similar measure like this in Health and Human Services last year that talked about the allocation of funds, and they're on, and I cannot remember what number or where we ended up going with this, but on line 57, on page 2, your bill references that the department shall retain a certain amount of funds from these contributions that are, I think, those who indicate they want to contribute their money to this worthy cause. They anticipate those funds are going to that cause, but this bill allows for $50,000 to be retained by the department. And last year, I think we asked the department to give us some information as to really what is the cost of administering a program such as the one we were discussing last year. And I don't recall where we were, but I don't believe it was $50,000.
Yeah, I think the cost was like $38,000, if I'm not mistaken.
For the administering of a program?
I don't know the exact cost on that, but I thought it was right around that price. Okay.
I guess the fiscal note refers to an ongoing cost of $2,000 annually. I don't know if that's the administrative cost or processing fees, but Mr. Chairman,
there is a fiscal note with this. I'm not sure it's in your file. I apologize. It was in the subcommittee. There is an initial fee of setting up the actual form, changing the form, and the software that's involved with it of some $30,000 that came out that will be credited, obviously, against the first dollar. So it is revenue neutral entirely. And then the $2,000 is an ongoing fee after the program, and the checkoff blocks is on the tax return, as we understood it in subcommittee. Does anybody dispute that? Okay.
Okay, so the actual cost withheld by the department would be the actual cost of administering
in year one, it would be $30,000, and in each successive year thereafter, it would be about $2,000. Again, associated with the actual cost of administering it going forward.
And the only reason I bring it up is the bill says that their cost, the amount that the department can retain, will not exceed $50,000 per year.
Right.
And I just want to make sure that the funds that individuals anticipate will go to the cause actually go to the cause and are not going to fund a department above and beyond the administrative costs that are there. The only point for bringing that up, I'm certainly in support of.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for that question. And to substantiate that, we actually do have a fiscal note that deals with those costs, and they are below $50,000, and they are actual in that regard. And it's not going to be, I don't think, any advantage taken by the department.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Representative Flood?
I was going to answer the question of Representative Graves.
Okay. I see no more questions. What's the desire of the committee? I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. Representative, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your hard work on this, and it'll be in rules this afternoon.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Chair recognizes Representative Flood, if you want to present from your place to tell us about your House Bill 985.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's very similar to Representative Collins. This bill attempts to create a fund where a taxpayer in Georgia can check off on their income tax form a contribution to the Multiple Sclerosis Research Program Fund. Multiple sclerosis, for members of the committee, is an incurable neurological disease. And there are thousands of Georgians who are impacted by this horrid disease every year. This program seeks to provide some additional research dollars to provide research into care and cure, but also to provide equipment to help those who are inflicted with this disease have more mobility as they have responsibilities across the state. As with the previous bill, the cost of administering this program is going to be the first year of $36,000 and then $2,000 thereafter. In other states where they've enacted similar programs, the multiple sclerosis programs have generated around $100,000 a year for research and equipment. If there are no questions, I would certainly stand for questions if there are any.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? I don't see any. What's the posture of the committee? A motion and a second. I think I heard one. Did I? Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion do pass House Bill 985, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you, Representative Flood. That'll be in rules this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I'm going to ask the indulgence of the full committee. These are rare times for rare purposes that we're going through here. We're on day 27 today. We're up against the 30-day rule, and what I'd like to do is suspend the full committee, but ask you please to hang around if you can. I know everybody's got 1,000 places to go, and ask the subcommittee on Public Finance Subcommittee to hear a second hearing on Representative Smith's bill that was heard first this morning publicly, and they can use this room. But if those of you that are not on that subcommittee could maybe take a break, but try to be back in 3 or 4 minutes, we might need to take up one further matter. If not, we'll come back anyway, and we'll tell you we're through. So with that, we're going to suspend the full committee meeting, not adjourn it, but suspend it, and ask Representative Knight to chair a subcommittee meeting. And if you want to, you can do that from right here, and I'll wait in the audience. We have had under discussion those two bills that the leader just spoke about, the tax reform special counsel, and also the bill modifying our fee base, our fees throughout the state statutorily.
Am I on?
You're on, sir.
Okay. May I comment briefly on both of them while I'm here, Mr. Chairman?
You absolutely can do whatever you want to do, Mr. Speaker.
I've started going to committee meetings lately. It has reminded me of what I've been missing, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of your committee for allowing me to come and speak to you today. Let me talk just for a minute or two about House Bill 1405, if I could. You know, we have had a very challenging session, still having a challenging session on being forced to undertake some fairly serious cuts to the budget of our state government. We're required at the end of the day to balance the budget by a constitutional mandate. And to do that in this economic downturn with diminished revenues coming into the state has been challenging. And this legislature will be asked to make some difficult and unpopular decisions at the end of the day on that budget. I think House Bill 1405, however, gives us an opportunity to use this challenge as the beginning point of a discussion to bring about what we have needed to do in Georgia for decades, and that is to reform in a very fundamental way our tax code. What it does is put together a special council of former governors, respected economists, and people from all across the spectrum to come together and talk about the flaws in our current tax code, and bring back some recommendations to this General Assembly that will have some teeth in them and that will require more than for us to read them and throw them in the trash can at the end of the day, which historically has been the practice that we've done. This will require an up or down decision by the General Assembly on those recommendations, this body obviously keeping the ultimate decision. I'm hopeful that they will bring back recommendations that will truly reward productivity and will look at ways of perhaps redesigning the sales tax base in this state in a way that Georgians, I think, have been looking for a long time, and that is a flatter and fair tax system that I believe the people of Georgia want. But obviously we're going to be guided to a large extent by their recommendations, and then look at some ways of doing what we've needed to do for a long time in terms of having that kind of discussion. And again, this is another example this session of how in this time of economic challenge we have engaged the other chamber here in this Capitol in a constructive way and are working together in a way that I think the people of Georgia will be proud of. I hope this committee will move this piece of legislation on, because the alternative, frankly, Mr. Chairman, is to do nothing except continue to grapple with these problems as we have grappled with them this session, and as that we will grapple with them at least as much, if not more, next session and probably the year after that. I would like for this year's General Assembly and this House to not only have to do that, but to look to the future in a positive, constructive way. And I think that's what this resolution allows us to do. It would be easy to say that this is not the time to do this. But I can tell you, having been here when times were better, that that's not the time to do it either. And so I think if there's ever a good time to do it, it's a time of challenge. And so I would ask this body to this committee to look favorably on this resolution, and let's move it forward, because I think that is what the people of Georgia expect us to do. I don't have the fee bill, Chairman Smith's bill, is he here in front of me? But let me just, and I'll be even briefer about it. I don't think I need it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. When we took the 2-week period of time for the House and the Senate to work together, I have to say that I don't think I've ever been as proud of this General Assembly during that 2 weeks. When you had members of the appropriations committees of both the House and the Senate working together, asking the tough questions, digging deep into the budgets of all of the agencies and departments in state government, I think it was a very, very positive thing for the legislative process as well as for the state. Part of that process was the work that Chairman Richard Smith did together with Senator Goggins in examining, I don't know how many, I think over 1,000 fees that state government imposes, and looking at ways to see if those could be modernized, and because some of those we found out had not been even reviewed since they were enacted in the 50s and 60s, and thinking that this would be an appropriate time to do that. I know they were guided by the view that any fee increases should not exceed the reasonable value of the service performed, and I think they adhered to that very well. But to go over each of these with a fine-tooth comb that they did and bring back the recommendations that they did, I think was truly a part of that extraordinary work that went on during that period of time. You know, I know that you hear pushback about fees sometimes, Mr. Chairman, but what I want to tell you is this, is that to not enact some of the or those increases is really to condone government subsidies. Because we found out, for one egregious example, that you can get an airport inspected for $10. You know, which I don't think anybody would truly try to defend that kind of fee for that kind of service. And so if you like that kind of fee, then you're basically subsidizing some of these activities. So I think that's sort of the choice that you have going forward, and I hope that this committee will look favorably on that package and move it forward as we continue to work toward not only crossover day, but toward putting together a budget that meets our obligation and adheres to our desire and obligation to be good stewards for the people of Georgia. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity of spending some time with you and look forward to visiting with all of you later on today when we go into session.
Mr. Speaker, we thank you, and we're honored truly with your presence, and I can assure you that this committee will do its work expeditiously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we need to go back and maybe take action at the subcommittee level on the fee bill, and then we can. Well, I tell you what. No. Let's since we've got the full committee here, let's go with the chair is going to call back up 1405. Mr. Leader, you're back. If you want to present from your place, which number? No, you're fine right there. Is that 23? I think we may have one or two questions left for you. We're again, committee, we're on House Bill 1405. Mr. Leader, you're recognized for that reason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize to the committee for having to leave. If I may first address Representative Abrams. Representative, I did speak to the Speaker at the other event on the way over here about your concern. He agreed he would meet with you, and we'll take it one step further. Because of the time in the session to get this bill out, to get it over by crossover day, if we're not able to come to some resolution, I'll go to the Senate with you and see if we cannot, once you identify someone, whoever that may be, and we're able to look at them, then if we can do that amendment in the Senate, I would not oppose it at all. So we're just trying from the time frame to get this thing going. The other economists, as I mentioned, are either current members of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, with one exception, who's already been down here in the session working on a lot of this information already. That was my only concern. And you have my commitment and the Speaker's commitment. We'll work with you to find an appointment that you'd be satisfied with.
Would you yield for a question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And Mr. Leader, I appreciate your indulgence and your work on this. My question would be whether that person would be placed in the economist category or would be competing for one of the four spots. And the reason I raise this is that, to Representative Graves, Chairman Scott's concern, there are multiple groups that would likely need to take up those remaining four spots.
Right.
And in my mind, the economic theory piece is what I'm most concerned about.
Sure.
And to your point about the other economists, I think it's an interesting cross-section of economists who have been involved, but I do think there's a vantage point and perspective of economic theory that should be included in that category. So if we can work from that vantage point, I'd appreciate it.
And what I'm trying to tell you is I'm not opposed to that discussion. Right. We need to know who that is.
Absolutely.
Because now we're just sort of talking in theory, and we sort of need to move the bill along. So what I'm saying is there's nothing that limits the Speaker or the Lieutenant Governor from putting another economist on there. But if, in fact, people from, healthcare or ag or whatever want to be on there and they should be represented, that's why we did that. we'll amend it over there and we'll create another slot or something, you know. So you have my commitment publicly here that I promise you the Speaker and I will work with you to try to find it. Look, there is nothing intended here to do anything but broaden this as wide as possible. I would hope that if we get this bill to the floor, we could get 180. I hope every member will see value in going through this exercise, that this is not partisan, Republican or Democrat, but this is something that candidly all of us sort of need to take a look at. And given the description of our duties up here, I think this panel would be better suited to do it. So I promise you have our commitment. We'll work with you.
Thank you.
Chairman Stevens.
I'm 29. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leader, I can't tell you how many jobs I've seen lost as a result over the years, and having seen the unequal playing field in our surrounding states that we've lost as a result of the unequal playing field in our tax structure. So I applaud you for getting the backbone and the rest of the leadership to bring such a bill forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leader, would you agree, though, that if we don't agree with it, we should be allowed to cast our vote with no retribution if we vote no on this?
Yes, I don't.
Thank you.
You should vote your conscience.
Thank
you. Representative Flood, is that right? 15.
Thank you, Chairman
Mr. Chairman, if I could come back, I mean, Representative Scott, you might be in a position to sign or veto this bill next year. So.
Thank you, Representative Scott, for giving me the license to vote against this bill. Quite frankly, I think this is well overdue, as I said earlier, and I just wanted to comment on the leader's commitment to resolve a couple of small measures so that we get that true, broad, diverse perspective on the bill, on the analysis of what kinds of changes need to be made, and I appreciate your support of that measure.
Thank you, Representative. And let me say this, and Representative Scott and I have been friends a long time. Of course, there's no retribution. You should vote your conscience. But we're trying to make this as open as possible. Now, I will say this: if someone votes against the bill, it's very hard then to include them back in the discussions to improve it. You know, we want people who are for the measure in the room working on it. So it's almost like a conference committee. You know, to be on the conference committee, you got to vote for the measure. So I'd hope that every member would consider at least moving the measure along to the next step in the process.
Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Leader. My father always used to tell me that discretion is the better part of valor, and I try to keep that in mind. But you know, there just comes time. You know, I have problems with this, and I'm trying to decide how I'm going to cast my vote on this today. But isn't it true, though, once we pass this, I mean, if it's passed, and once it passes the General Assembly, passes both houses, and if it's approved by the governor, but regardless of even that, if it passes, from this moment, I mean, not from this moment on, we have, as individual legislators, and a member and my constituents have absolutely no input, unless I were, any of us were appointed to that joint committee. None of us will have any input whatsoever into what we would vote on next year. I mean, that's my problem with it. I represent people. I have constituents. I would be brought back something that I would vote yes or no on that I had absolutely no input whatsoever into. Isn't that true?
In fact, it's the exact opposite of that. And to my good friend from Cobb County, I could not disagree more strongly. In fact, the exact opposite. The reason we're doing this now is to give for the next month the ability for this council to meet, to hold public hearings, to have input. And remember, the reasoning behind this, Representative Parsons, is to, in fact, give them the ability outside of the politics that are actually going on in this room at the time to be free to make recommendations, critical analysis, and other suggestions that we may or may not do. If at the time they come back with those recommendations, then a bill has to be drafted. It will have to go through another committee, and then it's going to have to come to the floor of the House for a vote. And then it's got to go to the Senate, and then it's going to be signed by the governor, just like any other bill. And I don't know the difference between this and any other bill. As an example, what are the differences? We've done this on the water bill. We did this on the Hope Scholarship bill. We have done it on several other measures, and I believe that we had a special standing committee on civil justice reform. We had one on CON reform, and there's a special standing committee now that is the Small Business and Jobs Development or something named. And so there's a lot of precedent for this. It doesn't usurp any authority out of you as a legislator whatsoever.
Well, I would disagree, but I don't want. I mean, I respect you and I respect the process here, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to extend an argument or anything like that or take any more time. But in response, I would say that I do recall that either last year or maybe 2 years ago, that in this room or one room exactly like it, the speaker sat right down there on a bill, a tax bill that he had, and we had the opportunity to have input into it in this room, in his office. It didn't pass, but that's the process, and that's the process that's set up. Some things don't pass. Sometimes they pass changed by our input, and I would submit that that's the way. That's Madisonian. That's Madisonian democracy, and that's what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be easy to do these things. I'll end my
comment. And my only response to that, Mr. Chairman, if I might, would be that, in fact, it's not designed to make it easier. It's, in fact, designed to allow us to get to the point to do that and to debate those measures that are I don't know what those recommendations are going to be, but I would suspect they're going to be difficult. And I would suspect they're going to go after some things that maybe all of us or some of us in this room have sort of championed. And we're trying to put in place something that will make this legislative body, whoever's here next year, to at least vote on that recommendation and move forward. There is nothing in here that does not allow you or any other member that is in this body next year to come to the committee to express their concerns or input or amendments or anything else as we would any other committee. And just like bills are discussed, members that are not on Ways and Means could make the same argument you just made about any bill that comes out of Ways and Means. But that's what the legislative process is really about in the final analysis. Bring it through the committee. The final say-so is on the floor of the House. Well, every member will have the ability to express their affirmative vote or negative vote based on their beliefs and their constituency.
Okay, thank you.
Last question, Chairman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, again, want to express my reservations to it, and I appreciate your answer, Mr. Leader. But it's somewhat beyond me that if we're going to name specific people to be represented in there, that we did not name agriculture.
I can, if I can address that. I understand that, or healthcare, or manufacturing, or the accounting, and we started getting into that, and so that's why we left the at-large in place. And I can assure you, without any hesitations, that based on my discussions with both the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor, the ag community will in fact be represented.
I see no further questions. What's the posture of the committee? We have a motion to pass and a second. Any further discussion? Representative Flood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to offer an amendment. Line 53. Striking line 53 and inserting in its place. You should have the amendment on your desk. Inserting 4 economists, Dr. David Solquist of Georgia State University, Dr. Jeffrey Humphreys, and there's a typo in Dr. Humphreys' first name, so it would be Jeffrey.
So the amendment as printed has a typo in it, but the gentleman's name is spelled wrong. Is that what we understand?
Yes, and also line 52 would be 12 members, it's supposed to say 11. So line 52 would be 12 members, and then line 53 would be 4 economists.
And specifically name Dr. David Solquist of Georgia State, and then the rest is...
Yes, but the amendment has a typo in Dr. Jeffrey Humphreys' name.
Is it first name or second name?
Well, actually, both the amendment and the bill. His first name is F-F-R-E-Y.
R-E-Y, okay. Just a second. And I guess to our lawyer, it stops with Dr. Roger and there's no punctuation at the end. Does that indicate what?
It's simply striking the entire line just restating that line. That's why it stops. If you look on line 53 right now of the bill,
Right.
it stops with Roger.
Okay. So we're okay. All right. Okay. Chairman Pete.
Mr. Chairman, just a question to the leader. Do you not have, you said you didn't have an objection to this amendment, but do you have any objection to now having a committee of 12? You okay with that? Okay.
We want the process to move
Okay.
forward.
All right.
That's why it's submitted to this committee to input.
Okay.
I do not.
I'll make sure.
Chairman Knight.
Well, I want to follow back up on Chairman Peake's comment here, and I do have concerns. I think it has been stated, and the lady looked it up, that Dr. Soquist is not a lobbyist. But I guess I've got a concern because I believe he has testified directly on bills before this committee, and on numerous occasions, and it has taken specific positions on them. I mean, not from just a pure overall policy point of view, but he has been before this committee, and I'm sure other committees, and has taken specific positions, and it sort of bothers me going into this instead of an overall position. And quite frankly, with all due respect to my colleague, Representative Flood, to introduce this amendment, but yet vote against the bill, we're either going to make it better and support it and move the process along, or, but to make the amendment and then come back and vote against the measure in itself, I'm not sure how that's constructive to the process.
Representative Flood.
I don't believe that we've taken any action on voting on the bill yet, and I don't. I'm not sure how Representative Knight presumes how I'm going to vote.
I'm not sure either, and I don't think that you're obligated to reveal that ahead of time if you don't wish to. Representative Taylor.
Just in response to Representative Knight, I actually have concerns about having a representative from the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Independent Businesses, because I know that they have taken positions on bills, positions that I necessarily would not have taken, and I think they come with a narrowed perspective and philosophy, and those are my concerns are related to the makeup of the council and the joint committee. I think Dr. Soquist is an excellent addition, because I think the other three economists actually have a hefty business-based background, and I think that this council is weighted in one direction. And so, if I had my druthers, I'd take out the chamber and the NFIB as well, because I know that they have taken, positions on tax bills.
We're trying to deal with the amendment before the committee now. Discussion on that. If you wish to propose the eradication of those two entities by amendment, we'll get to that. But the business for the committee now is the amendment. Do you have further inquiry or comment about the amendment before the committee to add Dr. David Soquist? Representative Abrams.
Thank you. In response to Representative Knight, I think it's important to include Dr. Soquist because he is an expert on state and local taxation, and as an attorney, he has been on both. I've seen him as an expert. He's an expert who's testified on multiple sides of an issue. So I would argue that he is not, by any stretch of the imagination, compromised in terms of his beliefs. He is an economist who has a very strong state and local taxation background. And if you look at the existing composition of the proposed economist, Dr. Humphreys does economic forecasting, Dr. Totaro does stochastic modeling and economic forecasting using the probability models. Dr. Reyes is a foreign exchange and risk management economist who looks at global exchange. And so Dr. Soquist would actually bring, I think, an added dimension in the area of state and local taxation, as he's the only economist with that as a focal point and with published articles on that specific issue. And so with all due respect to to Representative Knight, I do think Dr. Soquist adds an important dimension, and I think will add to the robustness of the conversation.
Thank you. I see no further comments. We have the amendment before us. Does everyone in the committee understand the amendment and the spelling change? Is there objection to the amendment? You object? Okay, I have an objection. So all in favor, we have the, all in favor of the motion do pass of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? Okay. The amendment carries. It's in. I would also now like to ask Legislative Counsel, Mr. Sawyer, are there any technical issues that we need to deal with before we send this legislation?
Yes, there's a few minor ones. The first two are identical on line 36 and on line 41. I would recommend changing the word said to any such. The way the sentence is written, it contemplates singular, whereas everywhere else it talks about measures or bills and resolutions. This just makes it consistent throughout.
I have a motion to make that change on line 36 from the leader. Do I hear objection to the motion? That change is in on line 36 and 41. Further?
Yes, sir. On line 55, after the governor's name, there's an extraneous comma and an extraneous word and.
Okay, does everybody understand? Did I hear a motion from the leader to make that change? Is there objection? Hearing none, that's in. Further?
No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Shorey, and thank you for all that you do, not just that. 14, is that Representative Taylor?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to offer an amendment as well. I don't have it written out like Representative Flood. Oh, I hand wrote it if any committee members want to see a copy of it, but it's simple. And it, hey Stacy. Basically, the joint committee on page 2, line 71, essentially would be equally divided between Democrats and Republicans, members of the majority and the minority. In the House and the Senate, it would remain 12 members, 3 appointed by the Speaker of the House, 3 appointed by the Minority Leader, 3 members appointed by the Senate, and 3 members appointed by the Minority Leader in the Senate. I think it's a good amendment if we're trying to take the politics out of it completely. I think one way to do it is to have the committee equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. My second concern would be, as I tally up the members of the committee, I get 8 Republicans and 4 Democrats, which is about 33% of the minority makes up about 33% of the committee makeup, but we're about 41% of the membership in the House. I didn't do that math on the Senate side, but I don't think it's representative. And I would leave it up to the leadership in both houses to determine which members have the proper expertise and experience to vet what will probably be a complex piece of legislation.
The gentleman has explained his proposed amendment. You should each have a copy before you. Do I hear objection to the amendment? We have an objection. Do we hear a motion?
I move, Mr. Chairman.
You move, do pass on the amendment that's before you. We don't have an identification number, but I'll show the committee its amendment he just explained. Those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. I better get a hand count. All in favor, please raise either hand. 3, 4. Opposed? The amendment fails. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I see no further questions, no further proposals for amendments. We have a motion before the committee do pass as amended, I think, don't we? Isn't that the posture we were in? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion do pass now as amended on House Bill 1405, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? No. Was that one no? Did I hear that? Two noes. Okay. Proposition passes. Mr. Leader, it will be in the Rules Committee this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, we still got to take that one other measure in the subcommittee.
Right.
You want to go ahead and do that now?
Could you go ahead and conclude that? We will suspend our action at the full committee level. Please, committee members, if you can possibly do it, stay around. We expect the subcommittee meeting to conclude pretty expeditiously.
All right. I believe we had gotten to the point where we had had a discussion, public finance and policy subcommittee.
Public Policy has passed on to the full committee House Bill 1055. Chairman Smith, you're recognized to present to the full committee your House Bill 1055, hopefully as briefly as you can possibly do it.
Well, considering, Mr. Chairman, it's Columbus Day at the legislature, and I just missed dinner with my delegation from Columbus, I will be quick. This particular bill addresses user fees. We identified over 1,800 different user fees within the system. And by going through each fee and evaluating these fees by when they were set, what year they were set, looking at inflation, looking at what other states are doing, we picked these fees out as a opportunity to identify those fees that we need to raise in order to cover the cost of a service or a good, and in some cases a license. We've worked through this bill, and I'll tell you, it's not very glamorous. If you've read through it, it's section after section with nothing more than a line through one fee and an addition of another. But despite this, the size of this bill, it primarily updates fees and licensing costs. There are 6 new fees in this particular bill. 2 are completely voluntary. One is when you request an administrative hearing for a DUI license reinstatement. That's $150 to request that hearing. Second, as far as voluntary, if you want to purchase the Market Bulletin or the Poultry News, there will be a subscription fee to cover the cost Currently, it's costing a little over $800,000 to produce that hard copy. It will be available on the web, or is available. There are 3 to ensure health and safety issues. One with and they do these, but they just don't charge for gas quality and also gas pump calibration, food establishments. And this is broken down based on the size of the food establishment, 15,000 square feet, above 15,000, less than 15,000. And then there are 2 other categories where a convenience store, as a food service or not. And then child care licensing. And one I think everybody would be pleased with, we're implementing a fee of $250 for a professional lobbyist. Plus, if they do not submit their fees at the appropriate time, then there is an increase in the penalty, and that also applies to you and I if we don't do our fees at the appropriate time. Which section? The lobbyist? I'm going to have to find it.
Are you finished with your presentation?
Well, she asked a question, so section 41. Excuse me.
Okay.
But basically, yes, sir, this is just an opportunity to address those fees that need to be addressed in order to cover the cost of the service or the good that the state provides individuals or businesses or groups. There is one short thing I would like to comment on, and that's the special license plates. Currently, you pay $20 for the registration, $25 for the design of the or the manufacturing, and then you pay $25 for the special license plate. We're raising that cost to $35 for the special license plate, and the additional fee will go directly to the unit or group that we're trying to as the beneficiary of that fee.
Will the gentleman yield to any questions?
Yes, sir.
Representative Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the lobbyist part, so if you're not lobbying for a state, county, municipal, can you explain that one more time for me?
If you are a paid lobbyist, that you receive pay to come and influence legislation, then you pay the fee. If you are a member of a garden club from your community and you come up, no, you don't have to pay this fee. It's only for paid lobbyists, professional lobbyists.
And is there like a table or matrix or something that
no, sir,
sort of has?
It's just done by section. It's not a table or matrix.
Okay.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Section 36, which is the $100 additional filing fee on civil actions.
Yes, sir.
That is a new fee. Is that not correct?
Yes, so that is patterned after the indigent defense fee.
And what service is it that the state provides that this is supposed to be reimbursing the state for?
Well, not being an attorney or a judge, from what I understand in the decision to include this, it would reduce frivolous lawsuits. Not everybody wants to pay an additional $100, but it's, like I say, it's just patterned after that indigent defense fee.
Do you have any idea how much money this will raise?
Yes, sir. Excuse me, John. As you can tell, I'm overloaded with information, a whole lot more than I really want. But I want to verify with budget. 50, how much? 53 million. And this would be titled the Judicial Operation Fund, with anticipation of this money going to back to the judiciary.
And this is in all courts?
Superior and state.
Superior.
All right. Magistrate?
No, sir.
No.
Okay.
Superior and state.
Further inquiry?
No, sir.
25, is that Representative Black?
Do you know at what point that would apply to bad checks?
No, sir. I have no idea. So you'd have to ask someone else who knows more about that than me. I think this is more like divorce filings and.
It wouldn't apply because those are criminal. These are civil actions as defined in the bill.
But civil actions, I mean, trying to recoup a bad check is a civil action, correct? This would prohibit some of the bad check civil actions. Now,
certainly not in magistrate's court or any of the municipal courts. There's plenty of forums for that. Yeah.
$3,000 limit or something. I don't know where the
15,000, and there's a bill going through the legislature to increase that to 25. Now is my knowledge of that, I think. All right, I have one last question, Representative Taylor.
And did I hear you say that this fee is not associated with any service? This is just a new fee?
Well, hopefully it would reduce the frivolous lawsuits, and also it's, like I say, it's patterned after the indigent defense fee.
But it's not connected to a service that's provided for.
Well,
it's just
they already have to pay a fee.
Okay.
This is
Representative Powell said that they don't pay a fee, and now they do pay a fee.
The maximum court filing fee, I've got this table here that maximum is currently $87.50. And you have money in there for the library fee, sheriff's retirement fund, clerk's retirement fund, and several others.
Okay.
And hundreds of millions of dollars in the state budget toward the judiciary.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's plenty of service that we pay for.
Right.
That's in that. I don't see any further questions. What's the posture of the committee? I have a motion to pass and a second. Is there any further discussion? House Bill 1055. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign? No. I'll have a hand count. The ayes, please raise your hand. And the noes? 2, is that correct? Matter passes, and we'll go to the Rules Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
One quick announcement. As a very, very small token of our appreciation, and it doesn't anywhere come near being adequate, there is barbecue in 133. I know every one of you missed your lunch. I know every one of you worked overtime. You started before light this morning. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it on behalf of this committee. Thank you. Barbecue for you in a hurry before we go into session 133. If you can get by there, we're adjourned.